Hey everybody, Braden here. Welcome back to another tournament game. Today we're going to be covering round 6 of the Canadian Open. I am on an abysmal -2 after only 5 rounds. I won 1 game, drew 1, and then I lost 3 of them so far. And I just lost to someone much lower rated, which was very unfortunate because it's always a blow to confidence, especially when it's someone over 400 points lower. I think they were about 450 points, or maybe even close to 500 points lower rated. So it was important that I had my mindset correct this time around to play the best game I could. And I think in the opening, that's not the case. But let's see how it goes. D4 from my opponent here, Jacques. Knight f6, c4, and I go back to old ways with the move g6, the King's Indian. Because after knight c3, sure, I can play the Grunfeld, but I don't do that. I play bishop g7, knight f3, which still allows the Grunfeld, but I'm not having any of it. I castle. And we see bishop g5, which is a bit of an unusual move. Generally, e4 is the best try at an advantage, but bishop g5 was played instead. I was happy all the same to see it. Just kick it with h6. This is generally a move that King's Indian players make. Nothing wrong with that. The idea is after bishop h4, which was played in d6, if we go into some sort of like King's Indian position here, we can be pretty happy that the bishop's on h4 because we can eventually start playing moves like g5 and knight h5. We don't want to do it too soon. Like, if white hasn't castled yet, it makes less sense because maybe they castle long, and we've just made a ton of kingside weaknesses. Generally, f5's played anyways, even if they castle long, but that's just something to keep a note of. They played h3. I think that was targeted towards, like, if I played g5 and knight h5, they have bishop h2. So I played knight bd7. We see e3. I play e5, which is just normal for King's Indian players again. Nothing crazy so far. Bishop e2, and then I go c6. So I went c6 because if I go queen d8, there's knight d5. And then I just have to go back to d8. And maybe this is okay to allow. I just don't see a point. It doesn't really make sense because we just gave up a move when we could just play c6. If they go d5, maybe we just go c5. I don't see anything wrong with this. Knight b5, we can probably just meet with like knight b6. We do have to defend d6. There's also probably queen e7 because knight c7 doesn't look too tempting because now we're threatening a6 here, and it's not really as big of an issue because e6 isn't available for them. But all right, so c6 was played, castles, and now queen e7, which is a normal move for the King's Indian again. And one of the ideas here is, well, maybe we go e4 if they allow us to. I'm just really hoping for a position like this. But they don't really give us that chance. It would have been nice. Generally, the King's Indian players want a structure like this because we're going to play g5, we're going to move our knight, play f5, and we get our normal King's Indian game. But queen c2 was played. I played g5 because that knight, the bishop is kind of annoying me at this point. And then bishop g3, and I thought I had to play e4 here, so I ended up playing it. And I don't think this is like the worst thing in the world to play. It makes sense here because after knight d2, well, now we should play rook e8. And I wanted to close things down because I played g5. Like, if I don't do this, I could play rook e8 here. I was just a little concerned of something like this happening, where maybe lines open up against my king. But no, that did not happen. I ended up playing e4 and rook e8. So now instead of playing for f5, I'm just playing for the defense of e4. We see rook a d1, and then I go a6. So this was targeted against any d5s. So, for example, I was like a little worried of d5 here. I thought this made sense with knight b5. And the idea of a6 is now if you get into situations like this, there's just no knight b5 anymore. So rook 81, a6 now prevents the idea. I wasn't too thrilled to play a move like d5 because this feels like something that they might want with knight b5. This looks very bad for me. And again, another reason why I thought a6 was just better. Now we see a4, which is a good move. Knight f8, and my d here is I'm just trying to reroute to this side of the board. And now my opponent makes a mistake, and this is just a mistake because it wastes time in a position that you can't really waste time in. It's a natural King's Indian type of position, and that's a big reason why wasting time isn't really possible. My opponent played knight b3. The knight does not belong on b3. Again, going for this d5 move, c5. The reason why the knight doesn't belong on d3 is because one of white's best plans now is actually to play b4. And we can see that happen by a5, bishop f5 to cover the pawn further, rook b1, h5, and then b4. And white's actually probably just winning at this point. This is an extremely bad version of what looks kind of like a Benoni because of the c5 break for black, but this is actually very, very, very bad. So that's one thing to point out. Knight b3 doesn't really help, and because of knight b3, now black is fine, and black can start going for h5, g4 stuff just in time, because after knight h7, the best move for white is just to move back and again prepare some b4, b5s. Now we see c5, which also makes me very happy to see, because now after d5, sure, my dark squares are weak. This does not matter, though, because my idea is f5, f4 anyways, so it feels like now it's just anyone's game. They play bishop d6, which doesn't really do much. I just play queen e6. I think they thought bishop g4 is a little bit more concerning, but I just go f5. It's really nothing. Bishop h5, rook d8, and here we can see that maybe my opponent isn't super used to these types of positions, because they're kind of wasting time with this bishop. Like bishop d6 kind of makes sense. It's just to avoid f4 with tempo, but bishop g4 and h5 doesn't feel like it belongs fully, because they go bishop e2. And now black starts going for the attack here with knight f6. Bishop c7, I just go rook d7, and I'm ready to go rook f7 with some f4. I'm just trying to help prepare f4 as much as possible. Bishop b6. I don't care that the bishop's there. I don't even care if they like won this b7 pawn somehow, which I don't even think they will be able to. And it doesn't matter that my rook on a8's doing nothing, because generally it feels like the a8 rook doesn't do anything. You just like only use every other piece, but black's fine. So f4, e takes, g takes, and f3. I thought this was interesting. Actually, if we go all the way back, instead of bishop g4, I think a stronger move for them. I think this is a mistake because they had just a much better move with f3. And instead of going for a queenside attack with some like knight a5s or anything, they actually attack on the king side and take advantage of the light square weaknesses. After it takes, they can take with the rook, and they're just in time to defend their weakness on e3. e4 is coming, and if the center opens, it's got to be white that's going to be better. White has more central control. I can see why this might not be too pleasant to go for, but at the same time, this is what white generally has to do in order to get an advantage in these types of openings. But white is definitely for choice here. But all right, bishop g4, f5, bishop h5, rook d8, bishop e2, knight f6, bishop c7, rook d7, bishop e6, f4, takes, getting back to where we were. Just wanted to point that out. It's important. And then f3. So f3 is always a concerning move in these positions. Generally, I wasn't as worried here, and that's because of e3. I'm more worried when it's a pawn on f4 instead of a pawn on f3, because now it feels like the dark squared weaknesses might actually play a pretty big role for white king here. Bishop d3 was played. I played rook e7 because bishop f5 is a threat, so I need to sidestep that with rook e7. Knight e2. in order to start blockading and also starting to attack f4. I go knight h5, just covering the pawn. Everything's relatively safe. Bishop d8, rook f7, and bishop h4, which makes sense. This maneuver I admire because it's just getting to the king side, and also it looks like it's playing a relatively active role. But black has a relatively strong attack here. It just is a strong attack here with this move bishop h8. And the idea is we're just going to play rook g7. We can't really play, unfortunately, queen g6, but we are threatening after that to play queen takes h3, for example. King h1 was played to sidestep that. I played rook g7. And one thing they have to avoid is there are threats of rook takes g2 in the position. Like if they do nothing, then rook takes g2, I think, just wins the game here. King g1. And then I guess we take. With bishop h3 coming as well. This is just a pretty crazy attack in general when you get a position like this. And you see how many pieces are attacking the white king. Even if this isn't necessarily the most accurate, this is ending with black winning the game for sure. Black should win this because especially this pawn is also really annoying. But okay, rook g7, and my opponent blundered here, which was pretty surprising because they've been playing they've been playing okay up to this point. Nothing egregious so far, except for like this bishop g4 and bishop h5, bishop back to e2 didn't really make too much sense, but they haven't made any other errors other than that. But this next one is it just wins the game immediately for me. They played bishop f5. I think they just like had an oversight. The bishop on c8 was also covering f5 and missed that my queen can just take it. And after my queen took it, my opponent resigned. It would have been interesting to see how the game would have gone. It's hard to find amazing moves for white. Maybe rook g1 here. But then I would be looking at moves like knight g6. I'd also look at moves like maybe even bishop d7, and then I don't know if I'd play bishop e8, but I want to get this a rook maybe even in the attack. It feels like eventually we're just going to crash through. There should be a way somehow if we just give it some time, and once we do, it will be game over. But that's how the game went. Bishop f5 and then queen takes f5. So that covers it for this game. I ended up winning finally after so far a pretty rough event, but now I'm only on -1 and there are 3 rounds to go. So my goal at this point is to break even. I think I was talking to my girlfriend after, it was either this game or the last one, where I said I just didn't want to play, and she really encouraged me to play, and I'm really happy that she did, because we will see later on why playing the next games was pretty important. So I don't want to spoil things too much, but I ended up doing better than even score, which is great, because when you start off, like when you're -2 an event and then you still get a plus score at the end, it feels like a nice swing around. So that's how this round ended. Now on -1, and I'll see you guys in the next round. Have a good one. Bye-bye.